75 years ago, on December 13th, 1937, Japanese troops occupied Nanjing, East China's Jiangsu province, and then the country's capital. In the following 6 weeks massacre, more than 300,000 people, not only disarmed soldiers, but also civilians, were killed. To remember the gloomy chapter of history and mourn the victims, a series of memorial activities is being held at home and overseas. In Canada, students are gathering to learn more about the atrocity.
About 800 students and educators in Vancouver got to hear firsthand about the Nanjing Massacre this week when activist group BC ALPHA held its 4th annual symposium in the Canadian city. The symposiums are held every year to bring awareness about what happened in the Jiangsu capital 75 years ago when the invading Japanese army killed about 300,000 Chinese during a 6-week period. The 2-day symposiums were attended by students from 14 different high schools around British Columbia.
THEKLA LIT, founder of the British Columbia Association for Learning and Preserving the History of World War II in Asia, says this is necessary to prevent such crimes against humanity happening again.
If more people learn about this chapter of history, then, the rest of the world will also give more pressure to Japan, and then they have to really come to face this chapter of history squarely and eventually make an apology and sincere compensation apology to these victims.
Founded in 1997, BC ALPHA has played a major role in Canada in educating both teachers and students about Japan's wartime atrocities in Asia. Unlike the acts of the Nazis, whose crimes are widely covered in Canadian school curriculums, China's forgotten Holocaust in Nanjing remains largely unknown. MARIUS fan DUIK van NOOTEN, one of the Vancouver symposium speakers, knows exactly what it feels like. In 1942, at the age of 11, the Dutch national was detained in a Japanese P.O.W. camp in Indonesia, and he stayed there for 3.5 years. Now 82, the retired ship captain still suffers from post-traumatic syndrome disorder from his detention experience. He says there will never be peace in Asia until Japan issues a formal apology for its wartime activities.
I don't think all the Japanese are like that. There's a few hardliners who are still in the government and refuse to do that. It has been presented before, and it was turned down. But I feel that we should continue to ask for it, and maybe eventually they will do it.
To promote the awareness of the atrocities, BC ALPHA has brought more than 200 Westerner teachers to Nanjing over the past 8 summers to provide them with a first-hand insight. Lit says she would like to see details of the Nanjing Massacre taught in every Canadian school, but currently it's optional and up to the teacher to include it in the curriculum. Thomas LALONDE, a teacher at RAMMS Secondary School, participated in a first Peace and Reconciliatory Tour for educators in 2004. He says what he saw and learned greatly affected him. And since then, he has included the slaughter history in his lessons.
And also it's a bit challenging too when you have Chinese students and Japanese students in the same class, sharing their heritages and maybe hearing this information for the first time and dealing with some of those emotions and feelings that might come out of that. So that's a bit tricky. You have to be sensitive to that and aware that certain tensions might erupt spontaneously, and so you talk with the kids and coach them through those emotions and feelings they might experience.
After these lectures, students expressed their astoundment and anger.
I thought it was completely atrocious what the armies did in Japan and to China, and it was completely shocking to find out that people did that back then.
Besides students' activities, on Sunday, Canadians of Chinese and Japanese descent came together to commemorate the slaughter with a candlelight vigil. TATSUO KAGE, a 77-year-old Tokyo native who has lived in Canada for the past 35 years, says one of the reasons why some Japanese deny the massacre is that no reports were found in Japanese media.
Well, I think it's more like whitewashing that history of Japan, I think. Conservative people are trying to minimize what Japan and Japanese did during 1930s. You see, so I think there is some trends, and it is some historians and some journalists who are denying all sorts of things which Japanese army did during the war.
About 70 people participated in a roundtable discussion to raise public awareness of the history. They call on the current Japanese government to acknowledge and apologize for the massacre.